Good afternoon, and welcome to BBC Two.
Welcome to Back to the 80s, the podcast that travels back through time in a rose-tinted DeLorean. Yes, folks, it's that time of the week again where I, Glenn, a.k.a. Dreadwind, kidnap somebody in the old nostalgia TARDIS and take them back to one specific decade that if you can't work out what that is, what are you even doing listening to this show? I'm surprised you can even work the technology to actually get to listening to this show. So, yeah, there we are. That's where we are, folks, in 2017. That's where we are. But joining me this week, he's a bit familiar, is this guy, mainly because it was his idea, this whole podcast. Back in 2010, this guy put a YouTube message up asking for people to help him with an 80s podcast, and I was the sucker who answered that clarion call, and 2017, I'm still doing it where he's had a few years off. It's not fair, folks. It's not fair. I will never be able to stop doing this podcast. But anyway, I love it really. It is, of course, your friend of mine, the Jer Bear himself, Mr. Jeremy Seabolt. How are you, fella?
I'm good. How are you?
Yes, I am doing well.
Feels like a warm pair of pajama pants. It's just nice to be back. It's always fun. Thanks for having me.
That's all right. It's like stepping into a warm bath.
It is.
Yeah.
Groovy times it is.
Which is apt because it's peeing it down here today. It's autumn has arrived, folks, in the UK, definitely. Great stuff. What have you been up to over the past week there, buddy?
Past week, what have I been doing? I had we're on what we call the fall break for school. So now that I teach the Youth of America, which is just how they let me do that is beyond me.
That explains a lot, doesn't it?
It does, yes. And so we're starting off our fall break. We went off. I was up in Cincinnati, which is not too very far from me, at a toy show last night. That was fun to get to go to a actual toy show, and it's not a convention, which was the convention world has taken over. I think there's a convention for everything, but just to actually have it a toy show where that is all that's there is just people with toys. It was kind of like going back to the 80s. It's how that used to be. Yeah. And the prices are a little bit more expensive than what they were back then. But, it's still good times.
So like a toy fair, or was it sort of like a big boot sale, or?
They called it a toy fair, but it was a flea market is what it is. Just like a boot sale. Just kind of everybody had a table and had some stuff on it, and away you went, which there was actually a lot of good stuff that was on there. It's just the world of eBay. You know, me and I like to have a good bargain. So.
Oh, yes, it's true.
I didn't get much. I bought a couple comics. I bought a couple of figures. I'm kicking myself in the butt for not buying a certain G.I. Joe that was in the package still, but I just I couldn't pull the trigger for what they were asking for it. But it's the only one I've ever seen in my life, so. What G.I. Joe? Which one do you think it was?
Is it Dusty?
No, God, no. They couldn't have given that to me for free. No, it was Firefly, and I haven't seen a Firefly in person on the card since I was a kid when I opened one.
Yeah.
So it was cool to see it, but they wanted some money in my right arm for it, and I'm attached to my right arm a little bit, so.
Yeah, you kind of need that.
I do. That I do.
Yeah. So what else did you pick up then, if you didn't pick up that guy?
I got a big lot of loose G.I. Joe figures. I haven't really went through them to see what all came with what, but there's probably 50 of them in a container. So I bought those, and they have some weapons, and they're nothing special, but they're ones I didn't have, which are cool. So I get to plop those up.
Video of it didn't happen.
True.
We need a video of you going through.
I don't know if I know how to do that anymore. When you were on the intro, you were talking about me. If you weren't talking to people from back in time, you were saying Jeremy doesn't know what he's doing. So hands off. But that was fun. I bought a couple of. I'm into Moon Knight for some ungodly known reason, picking up comics, and I bought a bunch of Moon Knight comics when I was up there.
Oh, that's okay.
He's
any particular reason you get into Moon Knight at the moment?
I don't really know. I think because nobody likes him, and it's cheap to buy him right now. So
yeah,
it's I've always been a sucker for the not so popular stuff, and with all the Netflix movies and everything else that's out there, I can't kind of be bothered by Punisher or Iron Fist and stuff like that. So I think that's honestly what has drawn me to him, is just the not popular demand of him.
Yeah. Fair enough. No problem at all. Anything else you've been doing or picking up? Or?
No, that's about it. What have you been doing in the last week?
Not much really. I haven't been well. I've had that old man thing of I've had a bad back. Because we've changed desks at work, and the chair that I changed to has made my back bad. So I've been enjoying not sleeping, being in a lot of pain. It's been great. But other than that, not much. Saw Kingsman: The Golden Circle last night. Very good film. Enjoyed that a lot. If you've ever seen the first one,
I have not.
You should. It's very good. It has Colin Firth being a complete badass in it.
Awesome.
It's really good. It's about the Secret Service, an independent Secret Service called Kingsman, and they're trying to save the world in the first one. And the second one, they have to team up with the US version of Kingsman called The Statesman.
Cool.
And oddly enough, talking about G.I. Joe, Channing Tatum's in it. He's not in it for that long, but he's in it, and he's very good. But Jeff Bridges is in it as well, looking and sounding incredibly like his old man. It was almost like Lloyd was on. If they want to make more Hot Shots films, now's the time. Is what I would say to that. But yeah, very, very good film. Really enjoyed it. It's that sort of cool, stylized Bondish violence that Matthew Vaughn directs them. So he's a guy who did like X-Men First Class and Kick-Ass and all those sort of films. So you know what you're getting. With Matthew Vaughn. He's a very good director, and I do like him a lot. And yeah, it's got Colin Firth in it, being badass, and Mark Strong's in it as well, who's very, very cool. But yeah, definitely go see that if you haven't seen it. And the other thing, because it's my birthday next week, I don't really want to pick up too much stuff in case I inadvertently do that thing where you pick up something that somebody's going to buy you. So yeah, we had a couple of pickups. First one, I've been in the market for a new baseball cap because I needed a new one, and I saw one today in Sports Direct, which was the Philly Flyers.
Cool.
And that's the favourite team of Adam F. Goldberg, who does the Goldbergs.
Mm-hmm. It's
Big Tasty's cap, basically. So it's like, it's good enough for Big Tasty, it's good enough for me. I fucking love that show. It's like a Les Maudlin Wonder Years. So yeah, so I thought, yeah, Big Tasty's cap. I want Big Tasty's cap. The other thing I bought, and this is something I saw, I'm having a bit of a Masters of the Universe kick at the moment. And I saw on eBay, somebody was selling fake Masters of the Universe Lego, because it's something they'll never make, Lego. So I don't really feel too. But if you go to places like AliExpress, which is like a Chinese auction site, you will see all kinds of fake Lego that it's stuff that they would never make, like Assassin's Creed Lego. I don't think they would ever make it. One of them that you can get on there is Masters of the Universe Lego. Now, I didn't get it off AliExpress because fucked if I'm giving them my details. No, not a chance. Sorry. Dodgy as fuck. So I went on eBay and somebody was actually selling the whole set of the Lego there.
Cool.
The Lego minifigs. So you've got, I'll send you a picture of them actually.
Awesome.
So you get Faker, you get Skeletor, you get Man-at-Arms, Merman, He-Man, Triclops, Sorceress and Ram-Man. And they're all sort of existing Lego pieces that they've clearly knocked off, but they have tamper-graphed certain details on. So the chess pieces are the chess pieces that you would see on Master of the Universe figures and that. So they look enough like them to be, you can imagine Lego releasing them.
That's awesome.
And I thought,
oddly enough, the funny thing is right before I jumped on with you, I heard Skeletor's voice on the TV, which I was watching the football game, which they were playing in London this morning. And I guess Geico has a commercial now with He-Man and Skeletor and all of them. I don't know if that could be old. I don't know. But it was kind of
brand new. Yeah, new.
It was pretty cool to see that. I thought it was pretty funny.
Have you seen the Money Supermarket ones?
No.
From over here. I'll link them to you later on.
Okay.
They're guys in bodysuits, made up to look like, so they're like muscle suits effectively. So it's a latex suit that Skeletor's wearing. And there's actually a video because it's done in Spain, I think, the advert. So they actually lock them into this latex bodysuit by it's got like a split down the back. And what they do, they put latex up the back to close it. So once you're in, you're in. It's got like its own cooling system as well as a suit.
I'd love to just have one of those and walk around the neighborhood in it.
That's what I do, basically. Dressed up as Skeletor, there's another guy dressed up as He-Man, so there's two versions. One where Skeletor's dancing to the theme from Fame.
That's awesome.
And then you've got one which is basically Nobody Puts Baby in a Corner from Dirty Dancing.
I have seen that one.
Yeah.
That is hilarious. Oh, makes me laugh. It makes me happy the internet's around.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, and they do say they're making another Masters film, but we shall see on that one.
Mm-hmm.
They've been given a date. I think it's December 2019. I believe you want to see it, but there you go. But yeah, apart from that, that's all I've really picked up this week. But yeah, I'm really happy with the little Lego minifig, especially the Faker. The Faker's really good.
So you already have them in hand?
Yeah, I've got them.
Oh, cool.
They came through. I will do a video of them. I just haven't had a chance yet. But I do realise you shouldn't really buy knockoff stuff. But the way I see it, again, if they're never going to make it officially, don't really have a choice, do we?
At that point, it's their fault for not having it. If they had it, you would have bought it from them. So screw them.
Exactly. Right then, we shall go to a bit of a break before we talk about our main thing this week, which, as we have said before, will be G.I. Joe. So to that end, I'm going to be listening to a few of the old G.I. Joe commercials. Put those on as our commercial break this week. So we shall be back in a little while. Until then, enjoy the ads. We'll see you in a few minutes. Bye-bye for now.
G.I. Joe will return after these messages.
He'll fight for freedom wherever there's trouble. G.I. Joe is there.
It's here, the G.I. Joe collection. Infantry Trooper. Codename Grunt. Bazooka Soldier. Codename Zap. Mortar Soldier. Codename Short Fuse. Laser Rifle Trooper. Codename Flash. Ranger. Codename Stalker. Communications Officer. Codename Breaker. Machine Gunner. Codename Rock and Roll. Counterintelligence. Codename Scarlet. Commando. Codename Snake Eyes. Each sold separately. G.I. Joe from Hasbro.
He'll fight for freedom wherever there's trouble. G.I. Joe is there. G.I. Joe.
Cobra's captured our attack cannon. Call in G.I. Joe. Go get Breaker. He can do it.
He never gives up. He'll stay till the fight's won.
Get the rapid fire motorcycle.
G.I. Joe is there. G.I. Joe.
He did it.
You've not seen the last of Cobra.
G.I. Joe and Cobra the Enemy. Each sold separately from Hasbro.
He'll fight for freedom wherever there's trouble. G.I. Joe is there. G.I. Joe.
Cobra's attacking our winter outpost. Call in the members of the G.I. Joe team.
And here's Gung Ho, Airborne, Doc, and Snow Job. And every Joe has a two-handed battle grip.
Get aboard the Battle Bear. It's G.I. Joe to the rescue.
G.I. Joe.
We chased off Cobra. Way to go, Joe.
G.I. Joe Battle Bear. Joe and Cobra figures each sold separately from Hasbro.
He's a terrifying enemy of G.I. Joe. Destro is his name. Destro is his name. A real American hero. Fighting evil Destro.
Introducing Destro.
You better watch out, Joe. Hey, what's going on? Destro's stealing our tank. We gotta stop him. We're gonna get you, Destro. You've met your match, Joe. Destro is here.
G.I. Joe Battle Tank comes with figure, other figures, and Destro sold separately from Hasbro.
He'll fight for freedom wherever there's trouble. G.I. Joe is there. G.I. Joe, American hero. G.I. Joe is there.
Enemy blockade! Send in the G.I. Joe motorized battle tank!
You can make it go left, right, forwards, and backwards. The G.I. Joe Battle Tank.
Smash the blockade! What a tank!
Each sold separately. The G.I. Joe motorized battle tank comes with G.I. Joe, batteries not included, from Hasbro.
He'll fight for freedom wherever there's trouble.
Are those the new Joes, Destro?
Yes, Commander.
Who's on the watchtower?
That's the Jungle Trooper. Codename Macondo.
And manning the howitzer?
That's the Flamethrower. Codename Blowtorch. And the Halo Jumper. Codename Ripcord.
Who's by the bivouac?
That's the Dog Handler. Codename Mutt. And his dog Jump
They've not seen the last of Cobra.
Watchtower, Howitzer, Bivouac, and G.I. Joe figures each sold separately from Hasbro.
Cobra's stolen our plans. He's escaping in the Viper glider. Joe, catch him.
The G.I. Joe Falcon glider, flying high in the sky, sailing through the air. He's America's fighter. G.I. Joe can fly. He's a real American hero, flying high in the sky. He's chasing Cobra in a desperate race, soaring and diving in a great sky chase.
You did it, Joe.
G.I. Joe Falcon Glider and Cobra Viper Glider sold separately, figures included from Hasbro.
He'll fight for freedom wherever there's trouble. G.I. Joe is there. G.I. Joe!
It's a Cobra attack. Get the G.I. Joe hovercraft. Get the new Joes aboard.
G.I. Joe hovercraft holds 9 Joes. It's the big new way to bring the Joe team into action. And it floats on water.
Release depth charges. Go, Joe!
A real American
Chase that Cobra. Way to go, Joe.
G.I. Joe hovercraft comes with driver, other figures, and equipment sold separately from Hasbro. Now back to G.I. Joe.
And we are back. Hope you enjoyed the ads as much as we did. So, yeah, G.I. Joe. Been a little while since we talked about G.I. Joe. Been a few years, I think, actually.
Probably. And it's not a popular thing anymore. Movies are dying off and everything else.
Because I remember when we first started the podcast, it was when we did news items, when there was news to talk about. then, so the only reason I really got rid of the news is because there was just nothing to talk about anymore. But, there were 25th anniversary figures coming out. There were all kinds of new, sort of things that they were bringing out.
Yep.
And films, cartoons, things like that, comics even. And one by one, these things seem to have been just sort of dying out.
It is a shame. G.I. Joe, I think, has always been just especially over here in the States, it was more popular than He-Man and everything else when we were kids. It's even Transformers. It was the thing you could go outside and play with. It's Transformers growing up. You kind of held them close to your heart. You didn't let Jimmy down the street play with them because he was an idiot and he may break it. And G.I. Joes were so durable, they were made to be broken, essentially. So they are so cool, and I'm so sad that they're not even around anymore. It's that not even shelf warming stuff from the movies. They're just gone like a fart in the wind, just gone.
Well, I mean, we won't dwell on how it's ended up, because I'm sure we'll come again at some point, because these things tend to. But how did you come to G.I. Joe when you were a kid? What was your first sort of experiences with them?
G.I. Joe came to me from just walking. I remember we had a place called Children's Palace, which was a step down from what a Toys R Us was. Mm-hmm. And walking in there, I remember just seeing the packages of these little figures. And at the time, it was the Star Wars craze. And I was like, oh, look, Mom, Dad, Star Wars. But they were like, no, those are too expensive. But look at these things. They're the same size. And I think they do the same stuff. So I'll get you 2 or 3 of these compared to one Star Wars figure. And I was like, oh, cool. I'll take 3. Sure. And the first three, I remember the first three I got. The first three I got were, I got a Snake Eyes, and I got a Rock and Roll, and I got Hawk, which was Snake Eyes. This was like the 82, 83, I guess is when they first came out. And Snake Eyes was the all just black from head to toe, not one drop of color on him. Came with like a little Uzi, and it was either a pair of binoculars or an ammo like satchel, but you could throw it around his neck and wear it like a necklace, which was cool. And then Hawk and Rock and Roll, they were back then. Those Joes kind of were all in that army green, that olive drab kind of a look. Rock and Roll was the one that had the bullets that were across his chest, so he looked different. So that's why I picked him. And I think Hawk was picked out by my mom probably because they were cheaper or something. But I went to Snake Eyes not knowing a thing about him. And then all of a sudden this little thing called a cartoon came out, and I've been hooked ever since.
Yeah, well, I think, let's face it was a cartoon that hooked in a lot of kids at the time and sort of hooked in a lot of adults now as well.
Sure.
I came to it really late. I came to it sort of around the time we started doing the podcast, mainly because it wasn't as much of a thing in this country. We had Action Force,
right?
Which, it's really weird and convoluted. Is the G.I. Joe sort of journey in the UK, because you've got Action Man, which is what you guys called the big G.I. Joes,
right?
So we had Action Man, and the company that owned them was Palitoy, and Palitoy made the Star Wars toys, or licensed and distributed the Star Wars toys over here as well. And in the early 80s, they said they wanted to diversify, but they wanted to diversify Action Man. So they made a range of toys called Action Force, which was Star Wars scale, but like Action Men. And that's where you get things like Baron Ironblood and the Red Shadows. You've heard of them, I'm assuming?
Yep,
that's where they come from. The only problem with those figures is that they have very limited articulation. So they didn't have the Hasbro G.I. Joe articulation yet. What they had was the Star Wars, so 5 points of articulation. And they were made to hold weapons. So if they weren't holding the weapons, they look silly, because the Red Shadows had the holding a gun pose.
Gotcha, yeah.
So left arm out, right arm up at the elbow. And if you weren't holding a gun, you just look silly. But that's the articulation they had. Then G.I. Joe came along in America in 82, and that's when they started marketing them as Action Force, but a different iteration of Action Force. So, whereas you guys got G.I. Joe, a real American hero, we got Action Force, international heroes.
Now, when you all got the cartoon, was it with your all's figures, or was it with, did it start out with just the G.I. Joe that I knew? It's
the G.I. Joe cartoon. It's just ported over here, and instead of J, every time they say Yo Joe, they say Full Force. They just ADR'd it and said Full Force. But to be fair, Jeff, we didn't really get the cartoon over here. We got it on videos occasionally. So you get like a VHS with a few on it. I don't ever recall it being on television. Ever. Whereas the Transformers, you did get it occasionally on things like Whack-A-Day, the early morning kids program, that kind of thing. You never saw Action Force. I'm guessing it was a combination of, it was just too difficult to port all the episodes across, and obviously ADR, all that dialogue that they had to. And I don't know, it was just, as we, it's sometimes I do miss having an American on the show as much as we do, because obviously now Back to the 80s is quite UK centric, because it has to be, because I don't want to speak for what it was like in America in the 80s. I didn't live in America. But from what I can gather, you guys had a very different experience than what we did, because you guys had Reagan. It was kind of prosperous time. The military was very popular, because it's America. The military is generally always popular.
True.
But you had that whole Cold War thing as well going on, where you were a bit more confident than maybe the UK was. The UK was in the shitter. We had strikes. We were having a time of economic downturn for a long time, where a few people had really had a lot of wealth, and the rest of us didn't. So we weren't as. Plus, we've got a different attitude to the military in the UK, where we do have that thing where we are trying to honour veterans and all that, but we I don't know. We tend to see the military. I think it's because we had like conscription, and we didn't have such a massive standing army as the Americans did. Because we're not a bigger country, we didn't need them. So we were never as pro-military as the Americans are, I guess.
I think another kind of thing for us Americans is that a lot of my generation and my aged family, my grandpas were in World War II, and our uncles were in the Korean War, and then our dads were in the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have ever have known this looking back on it, and who my dad was in the Vietnam War, and he's the normal vet. He just doesn't talk about it. It's not spoken about. He's just started to kind of get going to stuff because they're just dying off. They're just old. Mm. And, but I think it was something for them to be proud, and it was kind of like a heritage. They were glad that it's just not robots in disguise. They were actually looking at this stuff and like, especially with Hama, as detailed as he was of doing it and how these figures looked, granted, G.I. Joe got pretty neon-y there in the 90s, but in the beginning, the figures really looked like they would be somebody that you would fight. And all the G.I. Joes were, like I said, were in their olive drab greens and boots and everything else. They looked like soldiers. And
this is a military toy line at first. It became sort of a spy toy line.
Right.
People like Fred Diddy will tell you that. But you're completely right. And
I just think I think it was, and I don't know because I'm not my dad, but I can tell you that a price point, because G.I. Joes were cheaper than a lot of the stuff because of how little they were, and just it wasn't real popular until it got when it first came out. Its popularity hit, like you said, when the cartoons came out, it blew up. But I think it was easier for kids, and because of the price point, and it actually being the size of the Star Wars figures. If they'd have just continued the 12-inch figures like they had in the 60s and 70s, I don't think it would have went far at all, because, look at the Star Wars toys. They made those in 12 inches, and they're some of the hardest things to get now because they're so rare, nobody kept them or played with them. But almost everybody seemingly kept their Star Wars collection when they were a kid. It's amazing.
I think you've got that thing as well where if you've got 4 or 5 12-inch figures, it's very difficult to transport them around to your friend's house. If you've got 15 3 3/4 figures, they can give you a collector's case, or you can buy a collector's case, or in Star Wars you can buy the Rebel Transport. And you can stick all your figures in there, take them around your friend's house, get them out, play, put them back, take them back around your own house.
That's true.
It's, you've got that whole thing of transportability, which is, never underestimate that, because that is a big major thing, especially seeing as if you and your friend haven't got the same figures, then you can use your own, you can make all your scenarios and that lot, and it's very, very clever. I think they tried it with He-Man as well. You got things like the Battle Bones, didn't you? And, you did have collector's case for that kind of thing as well, or you could put them all in Castle Grayskull and carry Castle Grayskull. So again, you've got that whole thing which you just can't have with 12-inch figures. They're very difficult to transport. They can lose things, but I think you're completely right with the fact that Americans were at war pretty much from World War II onwards.
Yeah.
Whereas Britain just couldn't afford that. Plus, we've been battered ourselves. See, another thing that you should sort of think and factor into it is that America weren't really touched, apart from Pearl Harbor, which is Hawaii, it's not even mainland America. They weren't really touched by World War II.
Nope.
So you didn't have that whole economic downturn that back in the 80s we were still suffering from the effects of World War II and things like that. So I think we just had different attitudes to war and the military that it kind of did impede it. But we had the international thing as well, because obviously it's that other thing as well, whereas back in the 80s, there is nothing wrong with being patriotic anyway. It's one of these things that I think has become a nasty word in the last sort of 20 to 30 years. But in the 80s in America, it was fine to fly the flag, fine to be patriotic, fine to say, yes, gung-ho, full force America. Whereas in Britain, that's always been a bit weird, a bit frowned on. That, oh, we're British, we're amazing, and certainly in the last 20 to 30 years, it's a definite no-no. So I think you had that as well. So they couldn't be a force of British soldiers. Whereas the original Action Force, the Action Man one, they were on the Q Force and the SAS Force and all that. So yeah, it's a bit weird in this country, but I do remember my friend Andy Welch, who has been on this podcast. He had quite a lot of Action Force toys. He had things like the Shark, and he had the Cobra, all the his tanks and the Rattlers as well, and the one that snaps in the middle and is ridiculous. Which is that one? I can't remember now. But he had that anyway, and quite a few of the toys. Dragonfly, I think he had as well. So I mean, what? Just to clarify, I had none of these. I was Transformers and He-Man as a kid. All my G.I. Joes have come post 2010, and I've got a lot of them now, and I'm very glad to have them. And it's all Jeremy's fault. just to clarify.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
All the ones that he either sent me, or the ones that he sold to me, or the fact that he got me into it in the first place, it's all his fault. But with a mind to that, which ones did you have a kid? Which ones sort of did you play with? Which were your favourites?
The ones that I had when I was a kid, I really loved Zartan's figure, and it's only because he turned colors.
Yeah.
That was just kind of a cool thing, is, you know, he went out in the sun and he turned purple. I'd never had a figure that did that before, so I thought that was the coolest thing since sliced bread. I will have to admit that I was always Cobra when I played. G.I. Joe, G.I. Joe lost every single time because Cobra had the cooler stuff. Even as a 7, 8, 9-year-old kid running around, I'm like, tank versus his tank. And which as a tank, it looks like a Sherman tank. It looks normal. That's not fun. I want this tank that's totally wouldn't ever work in real life, but it looks cool as hell. So, but going with him, that I always went to the Cobra side. To be quite fair, we had a lot, in the neighborhood. I had a lot of kids my age, and we all had the majority of these, and I was the youngest on the block. And one of the cool thing about it is when kids would get out of toys, it was, we'll give them to Jeremy because he's the youngest. And
oh, you were one of them.
I was, and it was cool to have that because I probably only had maybe 10 or 15 G.I. Joe things as a kid that were mine. But by the time it was all said and done, I had almost a whole collection because they were just handed down so people could make room for baseball cards and, you know, other sporty stuff that was happening because they were just a little bit older.
Got you. Oh, there we go. Well, that explains a lot, doesn't it?
A little bit.
You were that.
Yeah,
it's spoiled kid.
And the cool thing about G.I. Joes when I got back into collecting in high school was when we went to places, that's right when people were getting out of, they were selling at yard sales and stuff. And I've told you 100 times that yard sales over here are just, it's a collector's paradise because it's where you find everything. Now it's gotten to be a little bit worse, which, you know, oh, boo-hoo me. But it's, with everybody having an app on their phone to have eBay and to be able to look at everything and see how much they are, you don't find as many goodies as you once did. You still randomly find some stuff every now and again. But it's just not out there like it used to be.
People are a bit wiser.
Yeah.
Yeah. They suck.
But
whereas before, I remember, I think it was the Omega Supreme, you got something like $5 or something silly like that.
In the box, yeah.
In the box, yeah, because they just didn't know what they had.
Had no clue. And, you know, the box had a tear on it, so they thought it was damaged goods. But a buddy of mine not too long ago was driving along and he saw somebody's garbage on the street and pulled over, and it looked like they had a flood in their basement. Looked maybe a water heater had broken or something like that. And
right.
He dug out, I would say, probably $3,000 worth of toys, of stuff that's just, what they threw away because it was in the water. And he opened it. But they had Starscream that was sealed in the box. It was an original one. The box was shredded to shit, but the styrofoam was still in perfect condition. And it was awesome. Pulled it out like it was 1985, and there it was. But had probably 30 Transformers, a couple G.I. Joe things, had all the Indiana Jones on the card figures from back then. Just a ton of stuff that people just threw out. It was amazing.
Nice. Video, it didn't happen. I still tell people about that legendary video where you had when you did have your basement and all the stuff in it, and you just going through things. And it's like, oh my god!
I miss those days. It was fun to chat with you all and have all that and do reviews and all that. It was a cool time. I wouldn't trade anything for like growing up in the time we did. I think we grew up in the era of the best movies, the best toys, and everything else. It's kind of cool.
Oh, I would definitely agree on that one. So what was your favourite G.I. Joe vehicle from the time then, or Cobra vehicle, should we say?
My favorite of all time that I've had was the Flag.
Yeah.
I got the Flag when I was a kid. And there's a video that I've been trying to track down just to kind of send it to my friends to show them. It's me as a young kid, and I go down the steps because Santa Claus brought it to me, and I'm just jumping up and down at the top of my lungs, just, high-voiced squealing, "It's a G.I. Joe aircraft carrier! It's a G.I. Joe aircraft carrier!" It's the funniest thing ever. I just don't know where it is. I've asked my mom, but she's like, I don't know. There's like 600 videos downstairs. You can look through them if you'd like. I was like, well, I don't have a VHS, so I can't take them home and do that. But the Flag, definitely, just because of the playability. Now, granted, it takes up a lot of room, and there's not a lot of moving parts to it, but you want to talk about having a pretty cool play area to have that, and to have the ships, and then to have the Terrordrome, which was also cool. Kind of have it just going back and forth as the two bases. There's nothing better ever as a playset than a Flag.
Would you agree with Retro Blasting? Because they did, not so long back, I think at Dragon Con, they did a playset presentation, basically. And they said that there wasn't much to the Flag, but it's just a toy, like a table for toys, and that's pretty much all it is. Would you agree with that, or would you say there was a bit more to it?
It's a little bit more than just a table with toys. I mean, it's got the inside of the ship, which doors open. There's a steering wheel, and I mean, there's an elevator on it, and there's some things you can do with it. Now, I'm a little jaded by it because I love airplanes. So for me to have a place just for my favorite kind of vehicle, an airplane, that probably makes my love for it a little bit more than what some will because of that. But no, and they're fair. It is a table. It's 6 foot long, and you can't move it. Once it's put together, it's pick a place, and that's where it's going to be, because you can't just pick it up and move it, or it just falls apart, and you have another 40 minutes of putting it back together.
But I mean, you've still got good memories of it, though, I'm assuming.
Oh yeah, just like in the basement back when I lived at the other house. I played with it down there, just 5 years ago or however long that's been. I would set up the G.I. Joes and run through it and still play with it, and it was just as fun as it was when I was a kid. Yeah.
Because I do remember you did do a video of it, and it was very, very, very cool. Never something I would be able to own, because I just don't have the space. And I think unless you're in America and have a basement or somewhere like that, like a room you can put it in, I just don't think you can have it.
No, I mean, you've got to have a passion for it, and you've got to have a want for it, because they're stupid expensive. And, I mean, you could set it up and use that and prop your feet up on it in the living room if you wanted, and put your drink down on it and all that good stuff. But yeah, it's a pretty cool thing to have. And it's one of those things, I think if people, it's one of those toys I don't think everybody should own by any stretch of the imagination, but it's one of those things that anybody that is into toys and collecting, you should at least see it in person to kind of get the full awe of it, of how cool it is.
Yeah. Excellent. And how about Cobra? You got a favourite Cobra vehicle?
Vehicle for the Cobra. There's so many.
Or would it be the Terradrome? Because obviously you did say that.
The Terradrome's good, but it would probably my favorite. It'd be a real close tie between the Bug, which was late 80s, early 90s, something.
Yeah, that's it.
Around there, and then the Night Raven. The Night Raven was pretty badass.
Night Raven was really cool. That was season 2 of the cartoon mainly, wasn't it?
Yep.
I think the first scene was the Rattler.
Yeah, and the Night Raven's just cool. I mean, the cartoon, it's one of the things that G.I. Joe did, well, they couldn't because it's kids, but this whole comic book that I've been reading, I've started to collect a bunch of the G.I. Joes and reading those, and the Strato Vipers that were the pilots for the Night Raven, they were some badasses. They weren't just, army building people that were just dummies like they were portrayed on the cartoon. They were kind of like Top Gun pilots that kind of had that swagger in the comics, which is kind of cool to read looking back on it.
Yeah, well, I mean, just stating and talking about the cartoon and the comics, that it's not like it would be today, because obviously today there's a whole thing called synergy that they do, like where everything has to be the same along those lines. Any comic that comes out has to reflect the cartoon, and any cartoon has to reflect the comic, and they're all the same as the toys. And wasn't that way in the 80s.
No,
not with Hasbro certainly, because you had the toys, which were their own thing. You had the comics, which was their own thing, and the cartoons, which didn't relate to the comics at all. Just as well, because the comics were, I would say even now, hard-edged. Because there was, like you say, Larry Hama writing them, and he's not usually known for his either dumbing down or sugarcoating of things. No,
and there's some of those that are real good, like fun reads to actually go through. I mean, I even read, they kind of have these things, they're called special missions, which they're essentially like a spotlight of a character is what they are. And I begrudgingly read Dusty's, and Dusty's kind of cool in the comic. I cannot stand him in the cartoon, but he's a cool dude on the comic end of it.
Well, to be fair, the cartoon does have some sort of dumb things, like the fact that they're always in their costume. And Dusty, even if he say if they're at like a garden party for the Gunpowder, Dusty's still in his desert camouflage with his desert camo on his face.
It's awesome. Wouldn't you just like to be at that party? You roll in and there's like Psych Out. He's that guy with the green has like the guy from Cloud City in Star Wars. He has those like headphones around his ears, and have Dusty and Gung Ho and Sergeant Slaughter and all them just kind of hanging out around a table in their suits. Just awesome.
Sci-fi. Sci-fi and his bright green blazers.
Love it.
That's great. I mean, we will talk about the cartoon because the cartoon is awesome. Any favourite episodes of the cartoon? Apart from Cold Slither, we're not allowed to say Cold Slither because everyone likes that.
Oh, okay.
Because given the choice, everyone will just say Cold Slither because it is awesome.
It is awesome, and if you don't like it, shame on you.
There's something wrong with you.
That's right. I'm trying to think of the one, but there's one episode I can't recall the name of it, but like Barbecue keeps getting this call from I think it was the Viper. Like,
yeah, the Viper is coming.
Yes. And it ends up being a cook or something like that.
It's Vindo Viper. He keeps calling him up and saying, right corner, 315. They don't know what it is, so they think it's Cobra calling.
Yep.
So what they do, they keep going to, 315 could be coordinates. So they go to the Antarctic, and it turns out that Cobra have like a holiday camp in the Antarctic underneath the ice. And it's just all these things it keeps saying, this Viper, whatever he calls, they somehow coincidentally relate to things that Cobra are up to. Which is also like West Point. Right there, afternoon. And they think, it's West Point, so they go to West Point, with Leatherneck, and all that. And it's like, the Cobra are attempting to take over West Point when the Marines are passing out. And it's No. And it's just that it turns out, I'm coming this afternoon, the Viper. And it turns out it's a little old man who's coming up, because Barbecue's just bought a firehouse.
Yes.
Ghostbusters for some reason. And he's coming to wipe his windows and he didn't know. And they'd get the whole G.I. Joe force ready for this Viper that is coming. It's just this little old man. It is a good episode. But it's like a Shaggy Dog story.
Yes.
Almost. Because it's just this long thing to the punchline at the end. It's a great episode.
It is.
It's really fun.
It's awesomely, they did it great for a cartoon back then. There's some bad cartoons that happened back then, but that stuff was great. I loved it. What's one of your favorite episodes? One
of mine, anything with Lowlight in it.
Mm.
Because Lowlight is a guy with problems.
he needs a psychiatrist.
Well, he definitely. Well, there's a great podcast called Knowing Is Half the Podcast. That for the longest time, it was basically a guy who's really into G.I. Joe and the cartoons, trying to get his two mates, who both of them are writers, I think. One works for Yahoo and one actually works on Cartoon Network. And Ray is trying to get his mates Gina and Michael, I think it's Michael, to watch every episode of classic G.I. Joe.
Awesome.
And basically they're saying, oh, it's shit, it's so shit. And by the end of it, they're actually saying, it's actually quite good, some of this stuff. And anything with Lowlight in it, they're saying, this stuff is dark for a kid's cartoon. It's Lowlight, like you say, it has serious psychological issues.
Yep.
Can't sleep in the dark, can't do anything but stay awake in the dark, never sleeps, never goes out. But anything with him is brilliant. And one of my favourite ones with him in it is Glamour Girls. And that's the one where that old lady is using the machine to drain women of their youth to herself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a great episode, but it's got one of the darkest endings ever. Because this woman, I think Lowlight throws her, or something goes wrong with the machine that's trying to suck youth out of these girls. Because it's Lowlight's sister she's trying to do it to. And it backfires, and you'd never see it, but there's this part in it where Lowlight's sister and Lowlight look at what this old woman has become now. And she goes, oh my God. And he goes, that's not the end I'd want. And I'm like, Jesus, show this thing. Show it. I want to see it. That sounds amazing. It's like this woman obviously is really hugely messed up. And it's like, wow. It's like, there's no way you would get away with a cartoon like that these days. There's just no way.
No.
And that was, I think, Beth Bornstein. Beth Bornstein was a great writer from the things like Iceberg Goes South is a favourite of mine as well. But Iceberg turns into a killer whale. It's someone with it's like the island of Dr. Moreau.
Yep.
So you've got this scientist who's testing these trying to turn people into mutant animals so that they've got the power of the animals and that kind of thing. What's the other one I like? What's it called? There's No Place Like Springfield, where it's like The Prisoner, basically. So Shipwreck gets kidnapped and taken to Springfield, which in the cartoon is like a Cobra stronghold. And they're trying to get information out of him. So it's constantly being beset by synthoids, which are clones of people who melt. You ever seen There's No Place Like Springfield?
I've seen them all at some point. I can't. It's been so long.
You know the basic premise of The Prisoner.
Yep.
It's like number 6, they're trying to get information out of him, but he doesn't know what that information is to begin with, and they're just fucking with his mind. It's that. And it's fucked up. There's one bit where he wakes up and he's, what am I doing here? Oh, I'm not in G.I. Joe anymore. It must have been a big dream. And he's having breakfast with his family. Obviously his family doesn't exist, but they must exist. It must have been a dream. And as he's talking to them, the synthoids just melt. So it's like, what is going on? And it's amazing. And that was written by Steve Gerber, actually, who wrote things like Swamp Thing and Man Thing and all that, bit of a legend in the comic industry. But I think the difference between, like you were saying, there were cartoons in the 80s and some of them were shit. G.I. Joe was, like Transformers, pretty good. I think it's because they got the best writers they could.
Probably.
So you got Flint Dille, you got Buzz Dixon, who Vietnam vet.
Yeah.
He was in the military. You got people like Steve Gerber, who was a comic book guy who knew how to write things like that. I think Marv Wolfman did them as well, and Michael Charles Hill and people like that. So they got people who were really good writers rather than just have staff writer number 3 do it. I think this is the reason we remember things like Transformers or He-Man or G.I. Joe or things like that, and we don't really remember Centurions in the same sort of sphere as these things because they didn't have the writers. They were tended to be normal workaday not comic book, but cartoon writers who just did what the networks told them to, and that was it.
Yeah, at that point,
really, they're just not memorable. And the ones that we watch, things like G.I. Joe and Transformers. And like I said, I didn't watch G.I. Joe, so for me to come back and say I really appreciate these things.
Yeah. The thing about G.I. Joe, it felt like a mini series. The episodes really didn't follow one another kind of like they do today. I think everybody's got seasons in their mind now. I mean, season 1 of Transformers and G.I. Joe and all that stuff, they had a flow to it, but if you missed last week's episode, you weren't screwed on this week's episode. It kind of had its own story plot, but
yeah,
it made you want to watch every week because of how kind of characters were built. Normally, like especially Transformers, G.I. Joe did it a little bit different than what Transformers did. Transformers, they would have a Hoist episode. They'd have a Bumblebee episode. They would have a character episode and written around that character to introduce them, and then throw them back in the background and then have another spotlight episode. G.I. Joe really, it was like a group. There was always four or five of them that just were together, and then when they were out of the episode, there was another group of 4 or 5 of them that came on.
Well, they tended to have little teams, didn't they? Sort of teams of 3
Yeah.
sort of hang out together. So Alpine would hang out with Bazooka.
Yeah.
Who would then hang out with Duke quite a lot. Oh, you had Modern Junkyard would hang out with people like Mainframe. So, you had Rock and Roll would be in that sort of sphere as well. So that's how they got around that, because obviously there's thousands of G.I. Joes, millions of the bloody thing. So, how to best sell them? Well, get them in their little teams and then sort of focus on them. So you would have an episode, I don't know, like Excalibur, where it'd be mainly Storm Shadow and Quick Kick who would be focused on. Or you'd have anything with Shipwreck.
Yeah.
Because Shipwreck's one of my favourite characters in all of G.I. Joe, because Buzz Dixon just said, let's just make him Jack Nicholson out of that film. Let's make him the biggest asshole on the planet.
Yep.
He's lazy. He's everything G.I. Joe isn't. He's lazy, he's impulsive, he doesn't take orders very well. He's constantly sexually harassing the ladies. In one episode, he is just sexually harassing Scarlet, and I forget which it is. I think it's Syntoid Conspiracy. Where he's just sat there, just basically saying to Scarlet, come on now, come on. She slaps him.
Yeah.
She actually physically slaps him. And then everyone says, Shipwreck is great.
Yeah.
And he is, don't get me wrong, but he shouldn't be. Then you got episodes like World Without End, which fucked up Worlds Without End, because that's the one with the alternate dimension.
Yep.
Where they'll get thrown into an alternate dimension. I think it's Steeler sees his own corpse.
How cool is that though? Because G.I. Joe, obviously they were in it for the toys. They had to sell toys and make money, which we all know and we get. But to be able to sit there and rattle off episodes of something that was, 30 years ago or however long it's been now, it's amazing just how good that has to be. And it's still, I think G.I. Joe, more than probably any of the cartoons of the big ones in the 80s, it has holding power today. You could put it on TV today, and I think kids wouldn't realize it's from the 80s, except for, they use walkie-talkies instead of cell phones, or, the telephones have cords on them, or something like that. But, I really do think you could just throw that on Saturday morning cartoons right now, and I don't think kids would be bothered by it. I think they'd sit and watch it.
I think kids would watch it. I've got a mate at work who I gave some He-Man DVDs to, and his little boy's watching that happily and enjoying it. So I think kids, if it's good, they'll watch it. But yeah, G.I. Joe especially is... I'm not ever going to say it tackled deep issues or anything like that. But to have an episode or a couple of episodes where they go to an alternate dimension and see how their alternate selves ended up and they died, and, the fact that they're now living in a dystopian alternate dimension where the Baroness is actually a double agent and was in love with the old Stealer who died in that dimension. That's quite sophisticated stuff for the market they were aiming for. So it just showed, number one, apparently Hasbro didn't want a lot of input into the show. As long as you make the toys look good, that's all we're bothered about.
Yep.
So as long as that kept happening, then they were happy. And also, like I say, you got Marty Pascoe wrote those episodes. And Marty Pascoe's written for comics for like 40 odd years.
Mm-hmm.
So you got these, again, like I say, really good writers writing this really good stuff and being left to their own devices because Hasbro trusted them to get on with it and make their product look good. I don't think that would be as prevalent these. I mean, Hasbro seems to be pretty good with it because they did the same thing with the ponies, with Lauren Faust, with the Friendship is Magic stuff. They just said, "We trust you. We've hired you for that reason. Get on with it. Make the toys look good." And to be fair, it was one of the best decisions Hasbro ever made because they couldn't sell more My Little Ponies if they tried, even now.
True.
That show has been super successful, and it was because they trusted them. And again, just to go back to the original point, if you watch or you look at the cartoons that have survived the 80s and the ones that I remember fondly, it tends to be because the company didn't have that much input or the studio overruled the toy company because, conversely with He-Man, it was the other way around. Mattel tried to get him involved in it and Lou Scheimer basically told him to go do one.
Yeah.
We want this character to be in it. No, that's not happening. And there was quite a few times where they said they tried to insist that they showed this thing just because the toy was in there. And because Lou couldn't find a thematic or narrative reason why that character should be there, it wasn't shown.
Yep.
And, history has basically found them out and basically said, yeah, these guys were right to do what they did. Don't get me wrong, there were some insanely, stupidly silly episodes of G.I. Joe, like Cobra Claws Are Coming to Town. Where Cobra miniaturized the whole of G.I. Joe.
Yep.
And Polly the Parrot Saves the Day, or Ode to Cobra, which is a Love Potion episode. Or as we said, the Viper is coming. So don't get me wrong, there are some supremely silly episodes. But G.I. Joe also didn't seem to have the downturn in quality with Sunbow that Transformers did, because obviously season 3, as much as I love season 3 of Transformers, it's not the best. That came later with G.I. Joe because you had the Sunbow series basically die off after the movie, which is mental, by the way, by design, and Duke completely, totally dies. We had it confirmed on here by Buzz Dixon.
Yep.
He said, totally dead, absolutely, 100% doesn't survive. And then he went away for a couple of years and came back as the Deke series, which everybody apart from me in the world apparently hates.
I think it's great.
I love it. It's stupid. It's silly. You got an episode where Metalhead's mum comes to stay.
Metalhead's one of my favorites. He's awesome.
Metalhead's a great character. But if you go to the G.I. Joe discussion area on Facebook with our friend Diana, who runs that, Diana really hates the Deke series. She's very much Sunbow comic Duke. Duke. I mean, the woman likes Duke, for God's sake.
Yeah, it's...
Love you, Diana. Flint's better. But yeah, it's like, I like it because it's silly. And it seems G.I. Joe was silly at that point with things like the Eco Warriors and things like that. But it wasn't the military hardline toy line that it once was.
No, and to be fair, they had to change with the times. That's what the times were in the 90s, was a blasting, neon, loud, goofy kind of a thing. I mean,
not as aggressive as it was in the 80s as well. Because obviously the Cold War was kind of done.
Yeah, it was peacetime, so it was that you can't write about kind of the wars and how they were anymore. It's you got to have a little bit of fun with it.
Yeah, and you can't nowadays I think they find it a bit easier, but there wasn't an enemy in the 90s. That's the whole thing. Is that in the 80s you had the bogeyman of the Soviet Union. In the noughties, obviously, you've still got it's Al Qaeda and ISIS, which is partly why I think G.I. Joe has fallen out of favour a little bit. Which is a shame, but I understand why. But even then, there were still things like Iran-Contras and things like that in the 80s. But I don't know, times have changed a bit, so I'm not sure whether that's got something to do with it. I mean, certainly with that fucking idiot that you've got as a president now, we could do with G.I. Joe coming back.
He could even guest star. Him and Sergeant Slaughter could be. We could have Trump.
Sergeant Slaughter would kick his ass. How dare you suggest that he would even be in the same room as Donald Trump?
Hey,
Sarge needs to be president. That's what I mean.
Donald Trump is a retiring member of the WWE Hall of Fame. I mean, let's not forget that.
I don't know, maybe Sarge would be better at helping people in Puerto Rico and wouldn't have a go at people in the NFL for needling.
Me and you are better at helping than he is.
Well, I mean, maybe they could bring G.I. Joe back and have them help people in Puerto Rico. Maybe they could go over there and make a point of it and say, look, fucking idiot. Because it's very, very telling. I mean, it gives away no plot whatsoever, but in Kingsman, the American president is actually in the film, like they do in films. And you know how usually the president is this, he's either benevolent or he's got his hands tied.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So he's either benevolent and I'll help the protagonist or, that kind of thing. Or there's nothing I can do, I'm sending nukes, God help us all. That kind of...
Yep.
What they have, I think they have it in The Rock is a great example of that. So you hear the president's voice. He says, I've got to nuke Alcatraz because of the VX gas, God help us all.
Yeah.
So, he's not especially helping, but he's doing what he has to do. He's not being a dick about it, basically.
True.
In Kingsman, he's a dick with the president. And it's one of the first times I've ever seen it. And it's like, that's quite jarring because you don't expect the American president to act like a dick in a film.
Well, that's what happens when you're a dick in real life. They make you a dick on film.
Yeah, but I mean, I wonder again, is that because obviously the last G.I. Joe movie, you had Zartan pretending to be the American president.
Yeah.
But again, that wasn't the real American president. They made a point of that. Could that film be made now? Because obviously that was back in 2013. Amazingly, that was 4 years ago.
That is amazing.
Is that another reason why maybe G.I. Joe, it isn't the right time for G.I. Joe at the moment because you've got a president who is divisive? I'm going to go on record as saying I don't like the man. I think it's very obvious that I don't like Donald Trump. I never have liked him before he was president, and I think he's doing an atrocious job of being president. The very least, he's incompetent. And it's weird because I've never seen an incompetent president. Obviously I saw Reagan and Bush, but at least they were presidential. And, they respected the office that they had. It's quite obvious that Donald Trump doesn't respect the office of the President of the United States. He seems to think he's a king. Do you think that attitude that he has, and the basically attitude around the government, and the fact that he is so divisive at the moment, is probably one of the reasons why G.I. Joe ain't coming back anytime soon?
I think it has something to do with that, but I think the reason that G.I. Joe has lost a little bit of luster is because of videos gone viral of, I mean, let's face it, since G.I. Joe's been around and since Mankind's been around, kids have mourned the loss of their family in battle. But now it's put on a pedestal with going viral and doing videos and stuff like that. I think that a toy company or a cartoon is just petrified of having that in that manner of actually having like real people going and doing real like G.I. Joe-ish type of things.
Right. Okay.
Kind of Renegades went on that. It got alien because that's what they had to do because of that. And I think that's a little bit of why I say that is everybody that they had out, they it was kind of like it was an army it was like the Turtles were there with mutagen and stuff, and people were getting weird and back then,
sci-fi, didn't it?
And back then, even with just the troopers, the Cobra troopers that were army builders, they were actually people. They weren't robots until the bats came around. Well, anymore, you have to be a robot because you can't kill a person on TV, even though they never really killed anybody in G.I. Joe. But at some point, you have to have it that way. But I think it's more of they are scared that kids could be traumatized by it because of little Johnny at school lost dad, and then it just would not have any about it. But if I do think if G.I. Joe comes out, it's going to be in a way of they're going to fight Cobra, but they're going to fight robots and animals and make believe stuff. I don't think you'll ever see G.I. Joe again where they have, strato vipers or alley vipers or any kind of viper that's not a robot.
So, I mean, basically the days of A-team aiming are over. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, they do kind of have that kind of thing with Star Wars Rebels, where stormtroopers do get killed. And do you think it's a case of if you don't see the faces, it's okay? Because, I don't know, because if you watch Star Wars Rebels, and I'm sure that you have seen episodes here and there,
yeah.
They don't sugarcoat that at all. They do show stormtroopers getting killed all over the place.
But
do you think that
you could have a point with that? Because even on the Clone Wars, they made it a point that they were clones and that they were people, and they removed their helmets a lot in that one. Yeah. And when they died, they never showed it.
Yeah.
I also think there's probably something, which I'm shocked that since it's Disney owned now, that they have any kind of that kind of violence towards any like human, that it's not a robot or whatnot blowing up. But I think with that, I think you're right. I think if you ask the normal, 6-year-old down, what's a stormtrooper? A robot? I don't think they know it's a person.
I mean, you could say, if you're being all philosophical and Star Warsy about it, that's the idea.
Yeah.
Because that's what the Emperor wants. He wants them to be sort of robots almost, and the clones are kind of robots anyway. But once you're in that armor, you're not a person anymore.
Yeah.
You could say that, I guess. But the other thing is that I would say is that maybe Star Wars has been a bit better than everything else about this, is that they've never sugarcoated death.
True.
At all, ever. Even if you go back to watch things like the Ewoks cartoon, especially the first season, there were real stakes.
Yeah.
They talked about death a hell of a lot. They toned it down in season 2. But in Droids as well, they did sort of have that spectre of death looming over. You didn't always see anybody die in Droids because it was a kid's cartoon at the end of the day. But even in things like Return of the Jedi, you've got that. I hate this scene. Absolutely cannot stand it. But you've got that one where the Ewoks are fighting the Empire, and there's an explosion, and one of the Ewoks gets up, and the other one doesn't. And the other Ewok goes down and shakes the other Ewok. Mm-hmm. It's clear that he's died. Yeah. And he starts crying. It's like, I hate that. I can't bear to watch that. It's awful.
Yeah.
I like Ewoks because I'm a bit of a wuss. But, it's again, Star Wars, often seen as a children's property, like G.I. Joe. But they never sugarcoated death. And I suppose, especially in the comics, rather than the cartoon never shied away from things like that people can get hurt. It's not all fun and giggles. But certainly the comics definitely didn't. People were getting killed all the time in the comics. Like major characters, like Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I've heard enough people who created G.I. Joe to say this, that it was always pitched to older kids anyway. So I think it might be, if they brought it back and pitched it at older kids again, sort of the 9 to 15-year-old, maybe that'd be okay to have death and destruction in it, and then sort of maybe tackle a few.
I think it could.
It's a weird one, isn't
it? It is. I just hope it comes back, because I think out of all of them, I think G.I. Joe is the one that's scared the most to never make a return ever.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Hasbro have got their eyes on visionaries. at the moment. That seems to be the one. Mask.
Which I don't understand that either. Yeah, Mask, you do it.
Mask, I would be happy with. Visionaries, as much as I'm happy to see it back, I think it's a weird one to try and bring back because holograms are kind of done. The whole gimmick, and it was a very 80s gimmick to have.
Well, with that and kind of the sorcery and they missed out on that when the Lord of the Rings was big. They should have. That's when they should have redone it, and they would have been able to ride the coattails of that.
Well, that's why Mattel tried doing He-Man back then, wasn't it? But
yep.
Because we've said it before. I was talking with Chris Vince about it the other day. Mattel, they don't like selling toys. Oh, we should mention that actually, because obviously it's no longer a Digital River who handle any of the Mattel stuff. It's Super 7. What do you think about Super 7 taking over the Masters line now?
Well, I did purchase the new, the 7 that came out that was Ram Man, Faker, He-Man, Skeletor, all that stuff. I purchased those, I don't know, maybe 6 years ago it feels like, and I just got them. It feels like it was 2 years since that happened. I got them and I didn't even realize I bought them because it was that long ago. The figures are awesome. They look great. The packaging's awesome. Even the Film Nation, series that they have out is the packaging and everything's awesome on those. That bothers me that it took that long to get to me. It took forever. And I'm gonna they just released, I think Monday, it's either today or Monday, the pre-order for the next 6, which is Man-at-Arms and Merman and Attila. God, they look awesome. I'm going to end up buying them just because they look awesome. But I'll probably be on the podcast, 2 years later, and I'll be, hey, I got these things. And
well, apparently they've got that all sorted out now. There were a lot of issues, I think, apparently that they had. I think Pix and Dan went into quite a few. But they do look awesome. I also want the reaction type figures that they did as well.
Those are cool.
They look great. But Super 7 seems to be sort of trying to bring out a bit more merch as well. Whereas Mattel, as we used to say, you used to have your sort of 10-minute rant.
Oh, I lost years off my life because of those assholes.
They just don't seem to want to make money.
No.
It is biting them on the ass now because kids now no longer care about Barbie.
I agree. And I'll tell you something else that I think that G.I. Joe, if they did this, I think they would have a hit, and they don't need a cartoon to do it. If they would abandon the 3 3/4 scale, and they would go to a 6-inch, like the He-Man Classics and the Marvel Legends, and have that much articulation, I think they'd.
That, didn't they?
They did, but they weren't that good.
Sigma 6, is that the one?
Yeah, those were terrible. But
the only thing I really know about Sigma 6 is that it was a joke on 30 Rock.
Yep.
It's when Jack went to the Six Sigma and Frank would say, "That a G.I. Joe thing."
But if you did it in the way of, if they released a 6-inch Serpentor and Cobra Commander, who wouldn't buy one?
Oh, I definitely would.
Yeah, sure.
I always look at the I can't remember which company it is now. The really super £400 ones. Those ones. Anyway, I forget which company it is now. But yeah, those. And you see those and you think, oh, I'd love one of those. And just no way. I don't really want to buy toys that have a payment plan.
Yeah, it's bad. But I almost think way of the world of how toys are going to be, especially with the news of Toys R Us and everything else. Going out for the thrill of the hunt is gone, especially when you can, half these people are ordering their toys while they're taking a shit on their phone. It's
true.
Nobody gets out. There are, just in my neighborhood, I see probably 50 packages get delivered to this little neighborhood that I live in every day. I've seen toilet paper be delivered on people's front door.
Well, you've got that thing as well on YouTube. It's the rise of the unboxing video.
Mm-hmm.
That is a thing, and then that is a thing because people don't go shopping anymore. What they do is they get their Google glasses or whatever, or their glasses mounted camera, and they go to thrift stores. I know at least 2 or 3 channels I watch that go thrifting. And they look for old games or old toys or all this, and that is, to be fair, it's fucking great and I love it. But it's, you know, the reason I love it is because you can't do that. You go to the Toys R Us that I've got near my work, and it's 90% Lego, if I'm being honest. Because Lego's the only company who seems to want to not sell things online.
Well, there's just not, for what it costs to have a middleman anymore, you don't need it. You can just set up a website and go. And I think there's going to be, that's the whole subscription of how Matty did it. I think they were ahead of their time with it. They just didn't know what the fuck they were doing. But,
of course they didn't know.
But I do think at some point these people will probably, instead of just making, all right, well, we've got line 12 coming out of Transformers. I think they're going to start making them to pre-sale, and that's how many are going to get made instead of having peg warmers.
Well, it might be the way. I mean, obviously, there's one thing that won't do that, and that is Star Wars. You will always see them in shops in brick and mortars because they want little kids to say to their mum, "Can I have XYZ figure?"
Yeah.
If it's me, can I have Captain Phasma? All iterations. Because I love me some Brienne of Tarth, shiny lady stuff. And speaking of which, not long to go till Star Wars now. You excited?
I am excited. I can't wait.
It's going to be good. Do you reckon Phasma will get a lot more to do? I reckon Phasma will be a proper asshole in this film.
I think she's going to get it handed to her, is what I think.
There's no way they're going to have her do nothing in this film. There's just no way.
Was it ever explained why she didn't? I mean, why they had a big shiny silver stormtrooper in this one and never used it, did anything about it? Has that ever been?
I'm guessing it's Boba Fett logic, isn't it? You know, create this really cool character, do nothing with them, so that people will say, "Why haven't you done anything with them?" And everybody, well, it worked on me because I fucking love Captain. But they did a novel recently that apparently is I've not read it yet, but apparently it's very, very good, and it explains where she comes from. And there was her, and there was another guy who was red armored, exactly the same as her, but red armored. And she something to do with them. And there's a reason you don't see him. I think she must have fucked him over or something like that. But I'm guessing you will see a lot more of her in this film. And of course, you got Justice League coming out as well. Not very. In fact, we got like 3 major films coming out. We've got Thor Ragnarok at the end of the month.
Yeah. Which
looks great. And I do like the way that the logo looks like Masters of the Universe logo, completely on purpose, apparently.
Sure it is.
So you've got that coming out, and then you've got Justice League, which I'm very much looking forward to. And then you've got Star Wars. It's like all these 80s properties from my youth coming back. And Hasbro apparently are interested in making a G.I. Joe film, but this time, don't put Bruce Willis in it. It was fine without Bruce Willis. And also, have someone with a personality play Flint. That'd be nice. And bring Channing Tatum back. That was a massive star.
They really missed the boat on G.I. Joe.
I think they made 2 half-decent films.
I like the films. I think they're fine. I know some people will chastise anybody that says a nice word about them, but
yeah.
I mean, they're made to be fun. They're good, fun films.
They should never make films for the fans.
No.
They can't. They should never do that because, you know, they do that and you end up with Superman Lives or something like that, you know?
Well, and the problem with that when they do it is that fans are, we like to think that everybody is one because we are and we live it. But the person that goes to the movies is my mom, not a fan that buys toys. So you got to make it good for, 150 per show of my mom to come watch it. Not me.
Which is why you've got 5 Transformers movies that are catered to NASCAR fans.
And I'll tell you, those, I hate every single one of those.
Not even the first one?
No, I don't like it.
The first one's okay. I don't mind the first one. If they sort of expanded on that, but it's after that they just you could see that Michael Bay knew a demographic that he wanted to reach, and that demographic is basically Ricky Bobby. At the end of the day, to be fair, they spend a lot of money on those films, and that's fine. But and then it was China for a long time, and China apparently aren't interested in Transformers no more. So,
they got Godzilla back.
Exactly. So, you got that, and I don't know. I really genuinely liked the first one. I thought Channing Tatum was quite a good Duke, and I really liked Eccleston as Destro. The second one is even better because the second one is basically just an episode of the cartoon.
Yes.
I love the plot. I love the fact that it's so stupid. It's just a big satellite dropping a metal tube on London, and it destroys London. And it's like, fair enough, there you go, that's London gone. And it's like, what? London's just been destroyed. You've just destroyed London. And nobody seems to really give a shit. It's amazing. It's brilliant. And it's got The Rock in it, and Adrian Palicki, who's brilliant in that film. I really like her. I've been watching The Orville. I managed to catch the episode of The Orville. You seen it yet?
I have not.
It's Star Trek. I saw the first 15-20 minutes of Discovery, the new Star Trek.
Yeah.
It's alright. It's not as bad as some people are saying, but it's not as good as some people are saying. So I watched that, and then I watched the first 3 episodes of The Orville, which isn't the comedy show you think it is. It's basically a more natural version of The Next Generation.
Well,
so
and
they
see,
don't talk.
And that's why I haven't given it a go, is because I figured it was Family Guy set in space.
It's not. It's really not. The third episode tackles some serious, deep-seated social issues. And it's quite a serious episode, as it were. But it's I've got a lot of people from The Next Generation working on it. So Brannon Braga's working on it. John Favreau is the consultant for the whole thing. He's a massive Star Trek fan as well. Obviously, Seth MacFarlane is well known to be a big Star Trek fan. We've got people like Jonathan Frakes is going to be directing episodes. The doctor on it was Cassidy Yates from DS9. Cisco's missus?
Yes.
That's her.
Huh.
So she's in it. So it's got Star Trek pedigree, and it's Bruce Broughton's done the music as well. And the opening title, if you catch them on YouTube, it's Star Trek. It's just it looks like Voyager, if anything. And it's like, this is out Star Trek. Star Trek. It's more Star Trek than the new Star Trek show is. And it's like, it's actually really good. It's got some sort of Family Guy jokes in it, but it doesn't do cutaways. It doesn't do that much base humour or anything like that. But it's sort of Star Trek, but with us in it, rather than people from the 24th century. So there are pop culture references in it, and there are people slightly swearing. I would recommend it.
I will watch it now, because I totally thought it was going to be a goofball, just...
I think that's how they trailed it. As well, because obviously they need to get Family Guy people to sort of watch it.
Right.
But no, it is... I was pleasantly surprised that it wasn't as bad as that.
Huh.
It's like, there are jokes in it, and there is humour in it. I don't think it's Family Guy humour particularly, or it's along the lines of A Million Ways to Die in the West rather than that. It's definitely Seth MacFarlane.
Right.
But it's definitely Star Trek.
Yeah, I'll have to check it out then, because they had me fooled, because I totally thought it was just, he was going to be doing Stewie's voice at the command center, and... No,
not at all. He's playing it pretty much straight down the middle.
No, that's good to hear.
The critics obviously hate it because they hate anything he does, but a lot of the Star Trek, if you actually go and look at a lot of Star Trek fans on Twitter and Facebook, Tony Russell, who's like the biggest Star Trek fan I know, hates Discovery, loves The Orville. He's saying, no, I'd watch Star Trek, by which I mean I will watch The Orville. It's a brilliant show. That is surreal. It's surreal.
That
Star
is.
Trek is being out Star Trekked. But there you go. I don't even know how we got on there. But yeah, like I was thinking that with G.I. Joe, maybe it's movies aren't the best thing for it. Maybe it's like a Netflix show. It should be.
I would watch that too. And if they made it, I think they should probably make it even. I don't know what. Crap. What am I thinking? I don't know what the rating is for the Punisher. I'm assuming that's like R or NC-7. Like, do they come with ratings on those shows? I'm trying to look it up actually, but
yeah, I would imagine so, because they do in Britain, and they have like parental control on there that you can have, and
but are they like a PG-13 or R, or how do they do Netflix? Because it's
I don't know, mate, because I don't have Netflix. But I would imagine they have a rating on it, but it's a suggested thing, or you can have parental control set up or something like that. But yeah, they totally should make it like a 15 or a 12 or maybe a NC-17 or something like that. Make it a more adult series. Kind of along the lines of 24, something like that maybe.
And I think a cool thing, I've always wanted, I wish, like if I knew somebody in the biz, which I don't, but I always wish for shows like that, they would build it up, like do one episode of Duke and how he, like, and build up a lot of people to build the team. And then there's a team formed, not just automatically having, hey, there's this group called G.I. Joe. It's a secret organization, that helps out things. I think it would be cool is like if the first season they built up to having a thing called G.I. Joe, and then on season 2, it was the team of G.I. Joe.
Yeah. That would work. Most definitely. So they should get on that, and they should totally make a Netflix show. Because we've seen with things like Stranger Things and that, how big these things can be.
Yeah.
And Hasbro need to make a decision. Are they going for the adult toy collectors, or are they going for the kids? And I think maybe they should do what Mattel did, and Mattel basically said, it's going to be adults, basically, who's going to be collecting these. Let's market them towards adults. As much as I love the Mike Young production team, and I do, because their heart wasn't in it, it didn't really work. With things like Rise of Cobra and Renegades, again, Hasbro's heart clearly wasn't in it. So it failed, effectively. Even though Retaliation was actually a box office success.
Yeah.
It's seen as a failure. Because Hasbro didn't capitalise on it. Maybe that's what they need to do. They need to make the decision, shit or get off the pot, and just say, it's for adults now. That's who we're aiming this at. The adult toy market from like the 25th. Because the 25th line was a very successful line. Do that. Do that again.
Yeah.
Get people like you and me back into it. Because the comics are unashamedly adult. They're even now, if you read the comics, they're not for kids.
No, they shouldn't be.
I don't think they should be.
It's war. There's certain things, you can have Captain America be for kids because superpowers and stuff. You can have Thor and all that stuff. I mean, there is no getting around that at the end of the day, G.I. Joe it's an army that is built to kick somebody's ass that needs kicked. And you can't put kids' gloves on that no matter how hard you try.
No. I agree with that. So yes, there we go. So we're basically in agreement. It should now be for adults. Get on it, Hasbro.
We should make it. We should all write strongly worded letters and all mail them with stamps.
Yeah, because that'll work in 2017, a letter writing campaign. We're old, mate, and we're getting old. Yeah, we're getting old, mate.
It's a bad part of it.
There we go. That is G.I. Joe. We've sorted that problem out. There you go. Jeremy, been a pleasure having you on, buddy.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad that you're still doing it. It was a cool idea. I had so much fun. I missed doing it, and it's an honor to come back on every now and again and talk to my buddy.
Oh, we will get you on very soon. I would imagine we'll get you on a bit sooner than last time. But if somebody did want to find you on the old wide world of the interwebs there, how's the best way to find you?
The only thing I really do anymore is just on Facebook. You can come look, and it's good old Jeremy Seabolt. I'm friends with most of you, but add a friend, shoot me a message. I like chatting about nerdy things. I'm okay at chatting about that.
There we go. Brilliant stuff. And obviously, if you want to find us on the podcast places, on Facebook, it's facebook.com/BTTE pod. On Twitter, it's @BTTE pod. On the blog, it's Back to the 80s podcast, all one word, .blogspot.co.uk. And on the forum, backtothe80s.freeforums.net. I myself, if you want to find me on Twitter, it's @CumryNerdCave. If you want to find me on Facebook, Glenn Jakeman. If you want to send me a message first, otherwise I won't add you because I won't know who you are. Especially if you've got no mutual friends in common there. I've had a few of those. Just people, I'm sure they listen to the podcast. And, you know, obviously the podcast page, and they've messaged, sorry, they haven't messaged, they've just added a friend request, and it's like, I don't know who you are, and we've got friends in common, and you've not sent me a message, I ain't adding you.
You grumpy old shit, accept them.
No, I don't know who they are. They could be Chinese people wanting to hack me. I have them a porn bots, and you can sort of tell that they're porn bots. And it's like, I don't want to be spammed with porn, thank you very much. If I want porn, I'll go looking for it myself. And also, if you want to find me on the YouTube there, it's Cymru Nerd Cave. I will be putting a video up about those Masters of the Universe figures that I've got, the Lego minifigs, because they are rather cool. Brilliant. We shall leave you this week with not only the theme from G.I. Joe the movie, the long, massive G.I. Joe the musical one, which is awesome. We shall also leave you with some Fedzler films G.I. Joe, knowing is half the battle things, but they're the silly ones, the Fendler films. The ones that Hasbro don't like. Oh, body massage. My favourite being the shipwreck one. Which is where, I think I used to know your mother, son. Tell me, Jimmy, do you like baseball? That's my favourite one. I don't know why. But there you go. Again, Jeremy, thanks for being on. It's been an absolute pleasure, sir.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And thanks for everybody listening. We shall be back very soon with another podcast. Take care, guys. Bye-bye for now.
Last word.
Damn it!
The code name for America's daring, highly trained Special Mission Force. Its purpose, to defend human freedom against Cobra, a ruthless terrorist organization determined to rule the world.
Fighting for freedom wherever there's trouble over land and sea and air.
Cool. Hey, I want you to check this out. Cool. Hey, can I try that? Hey, Hey! You're not my friend.
I'm just kidding with you.
Hey man, who's that weird dude you're talking to, bro?
My friends are here. Oh, cool. So, see you later.
G.I. Joe.
I want someone to take me to the hospital.
You sure about that?
Hey, look, he's an army.
Nice catch, Blanco Nino. But too bad your ass got sad.
G.I. Joe.
Oh man, check out that thing, man.
What do you want to do with it?
Let's launch over it.
Who wants a body massage?
What did he just say to us?
Hello, Mr. Body Massage Machine. Gone.
What the hell?
Body massage.
G.I. Joe.
Speaking of logs, I'm gonna take the Casby kids down to the river. It's on your sleeve, get fire on your sleeve. Okay. Alright. Use it up. Yeah. You didn't take anything out of our tent, did you?
G.I. Joe.
Last one there's the penis pump.
That's no fair. You're no.
Holy cow, I'm totally going so fast. Oh, fuck!
Punk.
Oh, we gotta do what you do, what you do.
Hey, what the fuck are you kids doing on my fucking lawn? And don't look at me when I'm fucking talking to you.
Help
Get that
me,
kid off my
help.
ice, you little wankers. Alright, give him the stick. Don't give him the stick.
Do you know my dad?
Oh,
G.I. Joe.
What is this? Just look at the door, Johnny. Look.